Hello, let me introduce you today to a new set of features of HistText. We'll start from the same query that we explored in the previous video. We'll start from shopkeepers, and we'll be working with the ProQuest collection in English. As you can see here, I introduced shopkeeper in the search window. I selected only 2 newspapers. I want to limit the search for the entire period. I also apply name entity recognition. We'll see that it's important at the next stage. These are the results. I will not go over them. This is not my purpose here. What I want to show you is, of course, the analytics section. When you get there, you first have an overview of what you have. And this is very important. Of course, some may look very technical, but in fact, the very purpose of offering various analytics and visualizations is precisely this. You want to know what you have in your hands based on your query. You start from research questions, or you start from a topic you have in mind. In this case, I want to explore the whole issue of shopkeepers in the English language press without having a very precise question. So I have here a series of indicators. How many documents first? You see that here. Then you can also see the number of sentences, total number of words, total number of unique words. So it's a preliminary view that gives you a sense of what you have. You can decide that you want to see the other aspects of analytics either by clicking like this or simply by using the arrows here, okay? And each time you click on the down arrow, you will go down 1 level. It shows you here how many levels you have for each element. So in this case, what I see is a second set of indicators about the average number of words in each article, the maximum number, the minimum number. So as you can see, these are by and large short articles. If I go next to the content analysis, then it's not just about the corpus, but it's about the text itself and the distribution of words in it. You can see, for instance, here the distribution of the main words found in these articles. Of course, shopkeepers come first because these were the query target, but then all sorts of other words that are prominent in these articles. I will come back to that later when I introduce the word cloud, which is another way of showing, in fact, the same thing in a different way. We also provide bigrams, that's the most common associations found in the article between 2 words, like mixed court, like Chinese shopkeeper, like police court, like shopkeeper charge, and so on. So again, this is getting into the text through these indicators which highlight the tone and probably the main topics that you would find in these articles. Another level is the trigrams. So in this case, we identify the most common 3 sets of words that appear together, like central magistracy, yesterday, charge, mixed court. We also analyze the word length distribution. It may look very linguistic, but this is quite important in terms of analyzing the kind of vocabulary that was being used. It also tells you something about the English language itself. Of course, a distribution of Chinese terms would be very different from here because usually it would be 2 or 3 characters, rarely more than that. Here, you can see that words go mostly from 4 characters to 8 characters, then 9 and 10, and then, of course, it goes down. What languages were detected? Well, I talked about English language newspapers, but in fact, in these newspapers, in these articles, in fact, other languages appear. In this case, for instance, we have Danish, we have French, we have Dutch, and also punctuation. Interesting again, not necessarily from a historical point of view, but it can also be useful for other humanists who work with text and the structure of text. So that's one other indicator that we provide. You can represent it differently, like a histogram. All these charts can be changed as you like it, of course. And then if you really want the data itself, you only have to click on the CSV. It will download the table corresponding to the distribution, in this case, of the different types of punctuation. Every visualization can also be downloaded here as a PNG file. Let me continue to go down the different. So these are the metadata fields that are not really significant here. A very important indicator is, of course, the distribution of your articles over time. It shows you when the term shopkeeper becomes important, how it changes over time, and also sometimes when you have peak, it may indicate that it becomes a more important object of concern or of publishing. Here, you can also again modify the representation. You can see here that distribution all over the different years, visually not very convincing. If we take this example of the shopkeepers and distribution over time, we can see that through the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, we do not see that many articles mentioning shopkeepers. But starting in 1904, it goes up and up and up. So each dot represents a year and the total number of articles that mention shopkeepers. If you hover over these dots, it provides you with the year and the total number of mentions. Another temporal distribution is one by decade. It smoothes out, of course, the results, but it maybe also reveals something. You can see that there's as before, a sharp increase in the 1910s and 20s. And then after the 1930s, the term seems to go to decline in these articles. Then other distribution, that depends, of course, on your corpus. In this case, because this is a ProQuest collection, as we mentioned before, the articles have been categorized by type. So article, feature, basically it's the same thing. So this refers to main articles in the two newspapers. And then we have other types. Then you have the distribution by source or publisher. Since I selected only the South China Morning Post and the North China Herald, of course, they have only these two, I could have, of course, a much different distribution had I selected all the newspapers. Then it would tell you which corpus, which newspapers may be more interesting for your research than just, for instance, these two newspapers. Let me go back now to content analysis that I showed before with the most frequent words. Another way to look at this is, of course, to go beyond the small number of terms that you can see here to a larger sample, and usually we represent it with the word cloud. It is presented separately in our interface. We can do a preliminary analysis of the word cloud to understand what we actually have in our dataset. For instance, the prominence of certain words like charged, fired, court, police, stealing, accused, sentence suggest that shopkeepers frequently appeared in newspaper coverage through legal proceedings, which reflects the environment of the French settlements and the way these newspapers reported on Chinese commercial activities. We can also see references to Shanghai, Kowloon, Hong Kong, and Chinese that indicate that the coverage focused on major treaty ports. And of course, this reflects the content of the North China Herald on one hand, and the South China Post based in Hong Kong on the other hand. We also see words like selling, trade, business, money, price, opium, And these point to the types of commercial activities that were being reported. The appearance of opium is particularly significant given the substance's central role in China's colonial economy. But we have terms like coolie, prisoner, and references to Japanese, British that again suggest that these articles were documenting the complex multi-ethnic commercial environment found in treaty ports like Hong Kong and Shanghai. So this symbol word cloud reveals how these newspapers produced in treaty ports, or in the case of Hong Kong, it's more like a colony, constructed narratives about Chinese shopkeepers, primarily through legal infractions rather than through routine business success. This reflected, well, social activities, power dynamics, regulatory challenges that Chinese merchants faced in these foreign administered areas. Beyond this analysis, you can in fact change the parameters of the word cloud. You have here a menu. If you click on this one, it will open and show you different possibilities to reconfigure the word cloud. You can search for a specific word. Of course, all the other disappears. Each time that you type a word, it also provides you automatically the statistics related to that term. More importantly, you can change the size of the font, and it has an impact on the representation, of course. So by default, we put it around 60. You can have a flat representation or really a common word cloud representation. You can set a limit to the frequency, minimum frequency. You want all the words that appear at least 3 times or 7 times. Doesn't really matter. In the same way, you can include a larger number of words, so 100 or 150. It's up to you to decide what is the right number. It can be very low if you really want to focus on the most important terms. You can customize also in terms of the appearance. So this is a default layout, but you can have a warm sunset. You can have an ocean breeze. You can have a forest. So it's just playing with representation. In the same way, you have a default representation like this and other shapes. Last, you can download this word cloud as a PNG, as an SVG. You can also share it directly. Just copy the link here, and then you can share it with others. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video where I will be introducing named entities.